Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement Podcast. I'm Mark Graban, a senior advisor with KaiNexus, and we are joined by
Greg Jacobson. I'm the CEO and co-founder.
So, Greg, it's always good to talk to you. It's a little bit of a somber topic today. We wanted to acknowledge and pay tribute to a friend and colleague of ours who passed away recently, Chris Burnham. Our friend and colleague Jeff Roussel wrote about Chris on the KaiNexus blog. I've written about Chris at leanblog.org, but Greg and I both wanted to share some thoughts and try to celebrate Chris beyond remembering him. He passed away recently after a brief illness, and it's still, I think it's hard. So.
It's certainly quite fresh and still raw, and somewhat unbelievable when someone passes in an untimely way. And so you are still kind of looking around going, wait, is he going to join the next, Google Meet or walk in the door? And, obviously intellectually you realize not, but emotionally it's hard to come to. And, I'm glad you had a really good observation, Mark. You said, hey, you may not know this, but I was the first episode of Chris's podcast. So tell the story that kind of led to us thinking about doing this as a podcast and really as a way to pay tribute to Chris.
Yeah. Chris had invited me to be the first guest on his podcast, the Lean Leadership Podcast, as he called it. This was early 2015. I was honored that he reached out to me to do that. And I found the email he had sent me back then. Email is forever. And he had sent a list of questions. I mean, Chris was passionate about lean. He was organized. He always had things in a row. So he had sent a list of interview questions, a list of what he called some hot seat segment questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get through all of those, but as Greg and I continue doing podcasts and Ask Us Anything sessions, I think we'll incorporate some of those questions from Chris. So that was how and when I first met Chris. But then, Greg, maybe you can tell some of the story of not only you being a guest on his podcast, but Chris kind of getting into the KaiNexus fold in two different ways.
I was Chris's 15th or 16th episode. It was, I never enjoy listening to myself talk, but it was a lot of fun going back and re-listening to that episode and remembering that time with him. What's interesting, Mark, is Chris tried to bring us in a couple different times, tried to bring KaiNexus a couple different times. And into
the company he was working with.
Into the company he was working with. And the stars really aligned when he was at Stryker. And I'm just drawing a blank. And this is where I told you, Mark, that I had worked a night shift and my brain wasn't going to be completely... I'm drawing a blank on what it was before Stryker.
Wright Medical.
Right. Thank you. When he was at Wright before Stryker had purchased him, and we got the opportunity to work with him, and he was one of our greatest champions. Did such a great job deploying KaiNexus throughout. I mean, Wright in its own world was it was a multi-billion-dollar organization before it was acquired. So, and then through the acquisition, he was a casualty, so to speak. That's probably not the best word to use in his remembrance, but he became a free agent, if you will, and that's probably a better term. And he reached out to us. From time to time, we know different job openings in the continuous improvement space, and so he reached out, and we got to thinking that we have a lot of software development expertise. We have a lot of software sales, software implementation, and we are fortunate enough to get to work with you on a part-time basis, Mark. But what if we brought someone into KaiNexus that has had the experience of using KaiNexus and has 15, 20 years plus of lean experience? What would a person like that look like on the KaiNexus team? And so we were able to really open up a new division, one that, quite frankly, now I can't even imagine not having, as it just becomes so integral to what we do. And so he was our first lean strategist back in the pandemic era. I want to say 2021. So
I think so. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I had always enjoyed opportunities to cross paths with Chris when he would come to the KaiNexus user conference, aka KaiNexicon. Really enjoyed talking with Chris during the session, going out, having a bourbon together in the evening. He was a lot of fun, and to talk shop and to get to know him a little bit personally and talk about passions around sports and other things. That was sort of like, at least for me, kind of the second phase of like knowing Chris, the podcaster, Chris, the KaiNexus customer. And then, I was really excited when he came on board at KaiNexus and started building a team, with Linda and Stephanie, working with him in the lean strategy team. Chris was a leader. And I think you probably had more exposure to that leadership, Greg. You were leading him. You saw how Chris was leading too.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I was leading him or he was leading me. Sometimes it felt like a little bit of both. But yeah, no, Chris became part of the executive leadership team here at KaiNexus. And I don't know if it was apropos, if there was some kind of force that aligned this, but I started to listen to a new book, and it's called Humor Seriously. And unfortunately, what I'm looking at is Jennifer Acker and Naomi Begonas. Unfortunately, my eyes are failing me in being able to see the exact authors, but I bring it up because it's really talking about the importance of humor in a professional and a business setting. And that is something that you didn't meet Chris and realize it after a few minutes. You realize just how large of a life his personality was, and just how truly funny he was. He was one of the funniest people I've had the pleasure of working with. And here at KaiNexus, work with a lot of really funny people, and and Chris was right there amongst them all.
And I mean, one way, we're very often remembering Chris, and we'll continue to do so. But Chris, at the beginning of the weekly Friday KaiNexus team meetings, had liked to throw in a dad joke. He often liked to throw in dad jokes, and kind of along with the word of the day, we were adding in, hey, somebody share a Chris Burnham dad joke of the week. He
would do so many funny things. He would, if you walked away from your screen, because he lived in Memphis and the KaiNexus team is scattered throughout the U.S. If you'd walk away from a screen, he would take your background and then he would make it your background, so it would look like he was standing with you in the office or or in your home office, whichever it was, and just so many funny things that he did. So I think it's only appropriate that we honor him with a dad joke of the week.
I just did a quick Google search because I don't have a lot of dad jokes off the top of my head, but maybe this counts as an example because Chris appreciated manufacturing. Greg, what would you call an adequate manufacturing plant?
I don't know, Mark. What would you call an adequate manufacturing plant?
A satisfactory. Is that a dad joke, or is that just a bad joke?
Nah, it's kind of a dad joke. Yeah,
that play on words, I guess, that goes with a dad joke. But have to try. But yeah, it's a loss. Not just the jokes, not just the bourbon talk, the basketball talk. It's quite a loss. So, if any of Chris's friends or family are listening, of course, we continue to extend our deepest condolences. And, we had gotten together as a KaiNexus team the week after he passed, and the stories that were being told, from a workplace context were very similar to the types of stories that we heard in Memphis a couple of weeks back. It kind of speaks, I think, to the consistency and the character of Chris.
I think that what he taught me, at least, or what I learned about him after his passing, was just how many deep connections he had made. So I think that's probably a good lesson for leaders in general. He extended well beyond direct reports and in his division. He really reached out to people, and I think he was a great mentor to people in kind of helping them advance their careers. And it was very clear he did that unselfishly. He was really just trying to, I think, be a lean leader, as his podcast was talking about. And he really took those sentiments to heart, and he practiced it day in and day out. And quite frankly, I mean, he technically reported to me. I had no idea he was doing so many one-on-ones and mentoring so many different people throughout KaiNexus. It was a pleasure to hear everyone's connection to him and how much he was helping them.
Yeah. A lot of one-on-one meetings with people. And, we heard, people sharing their stories of Chris found a way of connecting with those individuals in a way that was very, I think,
unique,
sincere and personalized, right? It wasn't always about what Chris wanted to connect on. Like, I think he was really good at finding the interest or what it was with that other person, and connecting with them instead of like force fitting them connecting with him. You know what I mean? Like that, he had a real knack for finding those connection points. Because I mean, he and I love talking about bourbon, but we know there are some people on the team who wouldn't want to talk about that at all. And
right.
I think that's, like, to me, part of that example of his interest in others and not making it all about him and what he needed to talk about.
Right. He was I'm thinking from the lean perspective of the supplier, always providing the information or the product in the way that the receiver or the customer takes it. And so for instance, for me, I never once talked to him about bourbon, but we talked about podcasts all the time. Right. And so he never missed a beat. He was always sending me really cool ones every week or so. And so he was his capacity to know a lot about a whole bunch of different subjects was really remarkable.
Yeah. So I think, his curiosity is a good trait for a podcast host. Do you want to go through at least a couple of the hot seat questions?
Let's do it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So just to remind everyone, these were the questions that he sent Mark to. I don't even know if.
Did he send them to you? I don't know.
I'm trying to remember. I don't know.
I wonder how that standard work might have evolved over time.
Yeah, like these do look familiar. Let's just go ahead and give it a shot and see where they.
We'd have to go back through other episodes and see, was he asking the same question? So I'm going to throw this one at you, Greg. I'll take a stab at answering too. And it's funny, before I read the question, like I think of Chris as being a very positive person in a way that I am sometimes not. Like, to where I might see the problem, Chris would see the possibility. I mean, I just and I appreciated that. Like, in talking with him, occasionally about KaiNexus stuff or lean challenges. Like, that's a good reminder there. Focus on the possibility, not just the problem. So this first question, though, has a little bit of a not as positive slant. Do you have a lean or continuous improvement pet peeve? Or what do you frequently see being applied or being done wrong?
Well, I don't know if I have a pet peeve about this, but I do get frustrated sometimes when now, Mark, you wrote a book on the subject. So you're the one that taught me about run charts or process behavior charts. And I have learned a lot about not being reactionary to a data point, but really looking for trends or being able to differentiate signal from static. And so sometimes I get a little annoyed when people are not necessarily kind of applying that scientific rigor to something that a run chart would be a really great use for. So if I had to, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And I think your book's Measures of Success was the one that kind of taught me that and kind of went through the rules in a non-statistical way that it made it accessible to an average person. So,
well, there's the possibility of we could use process behavior charts to not react to every up and down. Yeah, there's a problem there. So maybe not surprisingly, boy, I have pet peeves. Not to be just negative about it, but like the one that comes to mind is in the context of people describing Lean Six Sigma. And what I'm saying here is not a criticism of Six Sigma, but it's sometimes in the mashing together of the two. When people write or say, Lean is for speed, Six Sigma is for quality. I'm like, well, Lean is also for quality. You know, the two pillars of the Toyota production system are just in time or flow, which is different than, well, it might be an element of speed in the flow. And then the second pillar is Jidoka or built-in quality, like hello, right? So there's this kind of this false dichotomy of Lean and Six Sigma. And again, I'm not saying they can't be combined, but yeah, Lean is also for quality. So it's like nails on the chalkboard if I hear people saying otherwise.
I thought you were going to go with, Lean is for eliminating waste. And I think if you were going to, that would be a good question. How would you describe Lean in 3 or 5 words or one sentence? That isn't a horribly long run-on sentence.
Sure. Eliminating waste is part of it, but I think it's more broadly, this focus of on continuous improvement and respect for people. Right? Those are the two pillars of the quote unquote Toyota way. So we've got 2 pillars of TPS, 2 pillars of the Toyota way. It's all interrelated. You can think about a whole set of principles and mindsets that you might use to describe Lean or the Toyota production system. But eliminating waste is one aspect of continuous improvement. But we also then focus on the customer and make sure we're providing the right value to the customer, right? So customer focus, making sure you're solving the customer's problem with your product or solution. Make sure you understand the customer's need and use of that product and service. That goes far beyond, like if somebody were to say, oh, Lean is all about reducing waste.
Right.
Well, it's not all about. How literally do we take that? Now, like a good friend of mine, David Meyer, who's a former Toyota leader, is quite often says, TPS or Lean, it's all about problem solving. Like I'd be more willing to take that, right? You'd step back and say it's business problem solving. What are our challenges? What are our possibilities? What are we trying to do? And then you keep breaking that problem down into kind of like smaller, more specific problems.
And the best way to problem solve would be to allow the people that do the work to be involved in solving the work, which would show respect for people. The best way to problem solve then would be to understand scientific process and problem solving, or some kind of scientific rigor in problem solving. So yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
So there's a lot of components there. And then, for a hot seat segment question, these, if the intent was to be rapid fire, these questions do require thought. They're thoughtful questions. Can I throw one other question at you at least?
All right, shoot.
What do you consider the most important thing that you've learned in your career journey, other than don't react to every up and down on the chart?
I don't know about the most important thing. The thing that I've learned, or I feel is the most important thing for me recently, is to try to take a moment before I react. And it's kind of combined with the element of trying to stay, I don't want to say above the situation, like in a conceited way, but just removed enough from the situation where you can kind of be self-aware of everything's going on. And so you understand what are the needs of the other person in this encounter. It's not only about me. And the easiest tactical way to do that, I have found, instead of jumping to what you think is the answer, is simply to say, tell me more. And that's something that Chris taught me. And he, I don't know if he sent it to me through a blog post or through a podcast, but then we talked about it and he would always practice it very well. And he taught me it's such a great way. I use it in my personal life. I use it in my professional life, both on the doctor side. I mean, I mentioned I was, doing a night show last night, and on the business side, it's just such a great way to learn more information, to make it about the other person or the other people in the room, and to give you some time to kind of think through things. But tell me more.
Yeah. That's a good problem-solving technique of making sure you fully grasp the situation, that you understand that before jumping too quickly into solution mode. That is a helpful question.
What about you, Mark? What do you consider the most important?
The most important thing? That's tough. An important thing? I know the question is
thing now. Yeah.
The most important thing. An important thing is something I think I first got introduced to an idea, maybe, 8 years ago. Some formal context around change. And how often do we hear, or have we found ourselves kind of labeling people as being quote unquote resistant to change? And I think this idea that comes from maybe a couple different realms or disciplines, but this idea of people don't resist change; they resist being changed. I think it's such a powerful notion, and in the context of there's a methodology called motivational interviewing.
Tell me more about that.
In counseling. Good job. Motivational interviewing helps people through the process of change. So I think there's an important related learning, is that change and people's acceptance of change, or their willingness to try a change, is a process. It's not as easy as flipping a light switch. And motivational interviewing teaches us that people have reasons to change and they have reasons not to change. So instead of being quote unquote resistant, it's more like they're stuck, or the technical language that they use is that somebody's ambivalent to change. And so rather than making it seem like that person's fault for being resistant and like labeling them and giving up on them, you've really got to, pardon the use of the word here, lean in to understand more. Somebody says, I don't want to do that. What question might we throw at them?
Tell me more.
Tell me more, right? Instead of just saying, no, you have to, and trying to force the change or get rid of somebody because they're being quote unquote resistant. I think it's not textbook lean thinking, but I think it's a really important concept to bring into lean. And I kind of, it fits with, to me, the description of a lean culture that engages people in a collaborative, participatory way around change and improvement and innovation. Now, there's a time and a place where a boss has got to say, for example, like, hey, you have to wear your safety glasses in the factory. But, I think in situations where we're discussing new ways of doing things. Like we're recording this podcast episode in a platform called StreamYard instead of Zoom. Greg, I'll give you credit. You weren't being resistant to change when I suggested this.
No, I think motivation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to finish off your thought? Because I was going to.
No. I was trying to hand it back over to you.
Perfect. Yeah. No. Motivational interviewing, I think, is a great example of taking something from one discipline and then realizing the applicability, because it really started from the 90s in psychological addiction work, not psychological addiction, all types of addiction, but in the psychiatric practice of helping people with their addictions. And I think it's so easily and so meaningfully is applied in all kinds of situations. And it uses some of the same principles that mental modeling uses. Instead of asking a person, well, what are the reasons why you are finding it hard to change or you wouldn't want to change? Asking them and trying to get their brain to be open to, well, what are the possibilities that could happen, or what are the benefits that you could see if you were to do this? Mm-hmm. And getting them to articulate all of those aspects are far better in getting that person to move the needle in something that might be really good for them. And so I love I'm glad you brought up motivational interviewing. I feel like we've had conversations about it many years ago, and it hasn't been a while since you brought it up. So,
yeah. And asking people the reasons to do something, to articulate their motivations. That's talking about the possibility,
right?
The reasons to do something instead of talking about the problem or the barriers. And I think there's some important lessons there. You're not manipulating people, but getting them to articulate the reasons to change helps strengthen their commitment to at least trying the change.
And it helps personalize the potential benefits to that person. You might say, oh, well, you need to, we'll just pick on smoking. You need to quit smoking because it's going to, cause emphysema. And that person may not have any care about that, but they might say, oh, well, if I quit smoking, I'd have more money in my pocket every day. And that might be something that didn't mean much to you, but you articulated and asked for them to give a reason. And, that could be a positive reason for them to change. That's personalizing it to them. And I think that applies so well in the continuous improvement mindset. Let's say you're a continuous improvement coach and you're trying to teach a huddling process, or you're trying to teach an A3. So, Mark, what would be the benefits of huddling for your day? You might articulate things that never even crossed my mind. And so, motivational interviewing. I love it. And let me ask you this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you think motivational interviewing is to your practice of lean?
That's a very motivational interviewee question. I would say a 10. Fully committed.
Fully committed. So the tactical practice of that would then be, let's say Mark would have said at 8. A lot of times people would follow that question up with, well, why did you not pick a 9? But instead of doing that, the less obvious thing to do is say, oh, Mark, why did you say an 8? And what led you not to say a 6? Right. And now all of a sudden Mark would articulate all the benefits of making that change.
So let's say when I proposed to Greg, relatively last minute also, but thank you for rolling with that. Hey, we're going to record in StreamYard. Now, like, you might have thought, well, okay, I can go along with Mark. I can try it. I also don't know if I know how to use it. I don't know how if it works as well. You could have had reasons not to try StreamYard. And it's not that we were hashing through this, but, I could apply that, to you. We don't need to totally role play it here, but like, hey, Greg, there's 2 questions. of how important is it to you and how confident do you feel about doing it? Is that right?
Yeah. Or how important would it be to you to try a new service like StreamYard? Maybe
You might have said, 6. And then I would say, well, why do you say 6 instead of 2? And you might say, like, well, I know the recording quality comes out better, so that's a reason to do it. I don't know if that's the best case example, but thank you for not being resistant to change.
You know me, I'm always willing to try something. I was like, oh, cool. We're going to get to try something new. This is great.
So I didn't think I needed to give you like a whole briefing of all the reasons why, but I apologized. What did I say earlier about forcing change on people? Sorry.
Well, I think if the stakes would have been higher, like this was live at KaiNexus, I would have said, Mark, come on.
Yeah.
We should have practiced this. But the stakes were pretty low. If it would have failed, we would have simply just.
True. And if you had concerns and we could have done it through Zoom, it wasn't that big.
I can almost guarantee Chris would have had no problem and would have been excited to have done another platform.
Yeah. So, we will put in the show notes a link to the Lean Leadership podcast that Chris hosted. I'll throw other links in there, other podcasts and videos that we did together. We traded off here in the KaiNexus podcast series of me interviewing Chris. Why did you join KaiNexus? And then we, in a different episode, turned the tables where he asked me, some of that story of going back to 2011. Why did you join KaiNexus? So we'll point people to that. And then Chris also presented a webinar when he was working at Wright Medical. He was one of our customers who did a webinar as part of that series. So we'll share that. It's nice that we have these recordings and Chris is still teaching people.
Yeah, I mean, with regard to his podcast, he's quite an extensive library. I think he has over 60 episodes of some really high quality conversations. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So go ahead and wrap.
That sounds good. I'll end it with the way Chris ended many of our chats, and he would say, "I love you, brother," and it was always a very meaningful way to end things with him. So I'll tell you, Mark, I love you, brother.
I love you, man. Cool. That's a nicer way than saying, I'll see you next time. It's a little more heartfelt.
Yeah. Well, rest in peace, Chris.
Yeah.